I'm sorry the subcommittee chair, Senator Blackwell, could not be here this morning. I think the weather has affected his ability to get here, so y'all are stuck with the replacement. So I'll try to fill in best I can. But Bill, thank you for being here, and we'll hear from you, and then we may have some questions for you. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our thoughts and prayers are with everybody up north. We know that's a challenging situation, and hopefully we'll get some warm weather and they'll be out of it soon. Well, I'll keep my comments brief. I think if you follow anything going on in social media, you know what's going on at MDA these days. We're covered up, we're busy, we're having a lot of success. The about $65 billion in capital investment since 2020, about 25,000 jobs, record tourism numbers. Our major incentive programs are oversubscribed, things like our film incentive. We're getting all the money that you've appropriated to us in our special funds out the door competently. We've survived a variety of different audits, got clean audits on a lot of our major programs. And so I think things are going really well at MDA. We've had a significant success in recruitment this year, bringing our numbers up and getting a lot of those pins filled. Our request this year is going to top that off and to kind of address some of the gaps we had from last year. And then we've also got and prepared to present to you today not only our budget overview, but also our refill requests on our incentives. So to whatever extent y'all want to discuss that, we're prepared to go. With your permission, I'd turn it over to our financial analyst, chief budget guy, Brian Daniel, and he can take you through the specifics.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all for the opportunity to present our budget to you. All of you should have a one-pager in front of you, as Bill mentioned or referenced. The front part of that page is our budget request. The back part of that one-pager is our incentive refill request. And I'm going to focus on the front part with our budget, FY27 budget request first. As you can see, our FY27 general fund request is $26.4 million, which is a $3.6 million increase over our FY26 current budget and a $3.9 million increase over LBR. Our special fund operating budget request is just over $292 million. That's essentially level with where we are currently. Our headcount request is level funding, level pins. We're not asking for any new pins, but we are asking for the restoration of the 8 pins and the associated funding that was reduced in the LBR process. So the $3.6 million request that we have for general funds, I'm going to go over some of that in detail just to break that down into some smaller pieces to kind of give you an idea of what it is we're asking for. The first piece of it would be a roughly $600,000 increase for a career ladder model that we're trying to implement at the agency. We find that we're losing people between the 18 and 30 month mark roughly, and we're trying to figure out a way to incentivize them to stay with us and not just move to another agency to take a $5,000 promotion or $2,000 promotion. So we would like to implement a career ladder. We're working on that model right now. We haven't finalized all of it, but we have the basis of it there. And if we were to receive this funding, we would have it ready to go July 1st. Next on that would be along the HR line is we're asking for roughly $300,000 to implement a new HR system within our agency to help us with tracking and onboarding, offboarding, and all that. We are testing a little bit an onboarding system, and we really like what we've got, but we just need a little bit more robust of a system to do a lot more than just the onboarding and offboarding. So we are requesting for $300,000, which is an estimate that we think would get us a system that would meet our needs. The next thing would be another $250,000 for training. We have implemented the last couple of years some training for some basic programs, Microsoft products that our staff have access to, but maybe not necessarily know fully how to use. So we're working on getting all of our staff trained on those, but we also see a need that there's going to be a need to increase that effort and do some more specialized training for our programs and just economic development in general. There are several economic development certification programs, I guess, around the country that our employees could potentially take advantage of if we can identify one that we're happy with. So, and then of course, Southern Mississippi offers one as well. Another big part of the $3.6 million is $1 million for operating money. I know everybody's familiar with the restraints that were put on the agencies last year with the budget, the way the budget appropriation bills were written and the salaries were kind of fixed, they're restricted. We can't move those dollars to do things in the agency like we have in history. So that is, if that model is going to continue into 27 forward, we're going to need some plus ups in our operating dollars to help offset that reduction that we're able to do. Now, as we move towards filling all of our pins, that was going to be inevitable no matter when it was, because we were using the money from vacant pins to do that. And as we move towards getting fully funded, this was going to be a request in coming years anyway, but it's just kind of been expedited now that the model of the appropriation bill is the way it is. And then the last piece is $1.7 million for pins that we have but do not have funding for. We're currently allocated 209 pins. We have funding for about 190 of those. So we've got 19 pins in our appropriation bill that we do not have the funding to fill them. Even if we got to that level, we would not be able to pass the 190 because that's all the funding that we have available to us. So that breaks down the $3.6 million in general funds. I pause for any questions there before I move on to the next piece of the one pager on the front there.
Why don't you go ahead and finish and then we'll ask
Okay.
questions thereafter. Thanks.
So on the bottom of the one-page document that you've got there are two items identified down there. The first of which is the America 250, $1.2 million. The legislature was gracious enough to give us appropriation for that we're working in conjunction with DFA and the America 250 Commission to help promote America 250 and partner with local organizations around the state through a grant program that's being, I think, administered by the Humanities Council to give grants to help support that. So we have allocated and or expended last year's appropriation of $2.2 million. That went across a lot of things. It went through advertising, whether that be traditional TV advertising, digital advertising, outdoor print, and production. Again, $1 million went to a grant program and $1 million for the marketing effort. And then there's a small amount held back for admin to offset the administrative expense of administering that. So for 27, we're asking for $1.25 million to continue the marketing effort that we've already got in place. But also the two biggest chunk pieces of that are a Mississippi event that we're trying to plan. That's so 550,000 of that request would go towards that big event. And that's broken down into the whole gamut of putting on an event, stages, lighting, all of those components that would go into a large event like that. And then another $400,000 of that is going towards a event at the National Mall called the Great American State Fair. So that would go towards our Mississippi's effort towards that event. Then the next item on the bottom there is an energy accelerator program. That is one of three pieces. The other two pieces are on the back of this document that address a three-tiered approach that the agency is recommending the state take with regard to energy and preparedness, and just trying to get our sites ready and get the state positioned to stand up projects a lot faster. So with the energy accelerator, Mississippi currently builds the components that power America's grid, such as transformers and cables. But technology is rapidly evolving and interest in the state and the nation. So this is a way to help that in a meaningful way. This accelerator program would establish a collaborative hub that pulls together research industry leaders to develop next generation energy technologies, and fund research into shared interest of these manufacturers, and to provide the direction and resources needed for Mississippi industries to transition from building latest generation tech to leading the next generation. So this would be, again, one part of a three-tiered approach to it to help position us better for energy projects. And it's in the governor's EBR. It's part, I do believe, as part of his power play whole initiative of energizing the state. So it would go towards that, and we would issue that in grants to various people for those efforts. So that covers the front part of the page. I don't know if you want to move to the back to discuss incentive requests, because y'all have in the past chosen to fund some of those through appropriation and or through bonds. So whichever way you would like to go with that.
Yeah, if you want to cover anything in particular, I've looked over it, and I think my
I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
committee members probably have looked over that. If you feel like there's something you want to highlight, that's fine. But
I think the big thing to know, Mr. Chairman, is that this year we're not asking for a refill on our ACE grant program. And we feel like we have enough already in reserves there to address the ACE grant program this year. What we have done is shifted that funding into our to the governor's EBR request for Port Rail Road Investment Fund and into the Energy Ready sites. So the rest of the refills are pretty standard from what we've done in past years. But so just want to highlight that we're not asking for any more ACE, but we are kind of shifting that into some of these the governor's EBR directed initiatives. We'd be delighted to answer any questions on the specifics. We also understand that there's been a movement afoot here in this building to continue to fund or restart the funding for the small municipality and limited population counties grant program. As you know, right after COVID, we were receiving an annual appropriation to assist communities with water sewer projects, downtown projects, things of that nature. Last year, we came to you and got an additional increase in the amount that we could award for those grants, but no money was put into that grant program. You all still had a lot of ARPA money and other federal money come in and chose to do capital budgets related to that program. So you didn't put it through this program. But now that those funds are largely exhausted, and whether or not you do a capital expense budget this year, we'd like you to consider beginning to restart that program. It's actually, in all of the MDA programs we manage, probably one of the most popular programs that we have, because it gives a lot of the smaller communities access to smaller grants that really help them match federal funding to get larger projects done in their smaller communities. And so we just wanted to highlight that as a new ask.
Okay.
We're also prepared to talk about the divorce with tourism. If you want to do that, we've got a budget breakout for that as well.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that real quickly, Bill, and then we'll.
All right, very good.
Open up for questions.
Did they get this?
They don't have that. We didn't. I didn't know if we were going to go there or not, but
yeah. We've got some paperwork we'll share with you, Mr. Chairman. It's on its way up. But what we've done is what we've presented to you today is the consolidated tourism and MDA budget. And then we've also done a breakout. This was as requested by the Lieutenant Governor, which we briefed him on the other day. We also presented this to the House Appropriations Committee too, so you'll have the benefit of it. But essentially, you can see on the spreadsheet you're about to get the combined budget, our total request, all the LBR baselines, and then if we were to separate tourism out, what the final tourism budget would need to look like, as well as the final MDA budget. And this is the governor's request. He said, if you want to break out tourism, these are the numbers we'd like to see for him to support the separate tourism agency. I've also been directed to say we're not necessarily in favor of growing the size of government and creating new agencies. But if it's the will of the legislature and there's unanimous support in both bodies, the governor said he'd be willing to sign it as long as the budgets for both agencies are funded at this level. So if there's any questions on that, we'd be delighted to talk to you about it. But essentially, you can see next to the big red column in the sort of to the right, that would be the end state of MDA. And if you take a look at the column immediately to the left, that would be the end state of the tourism department. And this is a very conservative approach. We basically took about $5 million, $6 million that will come out of MDA and go into the new tourism budget. And then there'll be a one-time plus up, as well as ongoing plus up for tourism to deal with the transaction costs associated with the separation, and then a few additional pins that would be added to support the back office support there. And that discussion of those additional pins was had last year with Elbow, and we're not proposing anything that we didn't agree to last year. There's no surprises in this at all, but we do have the actual numbers now to make it work. So if that's your will and pleasure, these are the numbers we're asking for. Be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, let me stop just quickly on that point, and I'm going to then open it up. I've got several other questions, but is that it? Are you finished with the presentation? But since you're on that point, I'm trying to process this all quickly. What is the amount that you think you would reduce your budget if the tourism department was created separately? And then I'm trying to process these spreadsheets, and then what is the amount that you think it would cost to stand up the Department of Tourism? I remember some of those numbers from last year, but I frankly don't.
Looking at the legal size piece of paper in front of you, that middle column, the middle section there's 4 columns there. The far left-hand column is their current budget within MDA. That is their
$8.1 million.
$5.7 million in general funds and 7.9 total. So there's four columns in the middle, says tourism, separate tourism budget at the top of it. That is their current operating budget within MDA. So that's the part that would be picked up, general funds and PNs and moved over to a new Department of Tourism. And then you'll have the next column there contemplates or factors in. There's currently an EDA grant that makes up the $2 million in special funds that's in their budget. That grant ended in December, so they will no longer need the funding associated with that. So that would be a reduction of about $1.2 million in general funds. But there is I guess, corresponding $1.3 million plus up in general funds for the items that are identified on the smaller piece of paper that you've got with the yellow highlighting on it. That breaks out how we got to $1.3 million. If you look to the next to last column, it is 1.3, which is the sum of all the columns to the left there. So it's all of the plus up, some of them one time, some of them ongoing. And so that is what we estimate it would be needed to properly stand up. And again, that
1.3 is the additional cost.
that would be the additional cost to the state in total for this particular scenario to play out.
Okay. All right. I do have other questions, but I'll yield at this time for my subcommittee members to see if they have questions. Senator McClendon, Senator Wiggins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your presentation, I just want to thank you for separating out the tourism budget. Appreciate that. And Mr. Cork, I want to thank you for actually appearing. We have some statewide officials who choose not to come to the budget hearings, so I think that's commended. I have some comments and then I want to turn it over to you. But Mr. Cork, you and I had an exchange prior to session about MDA and the coast. You received my letter, I think. You received my letter. I didn't receive a response to my letter. We can talk offline about it, but the question that I have on your budget request that pertains to me, and I wrote it down here. I said, why should I sign on to your requests where nothing of consequence gets landed to the south of Hattiesburg by MDA? Nothing on your request mentions the coast. During the exchange that you and I had via letter, I can't tell you how many people reached out to me and said, I agree with you, Senator Wiggins. So the fact of the matter is that people down by my way believe that MDA does very little, if anything, for the coast. And it's, as I said in my letter, it's been 10 years at least that I've heard that MDA's landed any project of value on the coast. And yes, I was taken aback by your cover letter on the GCRF. I wasn't the only one. It was taken as directing to us what should be done. And as you know, in my letter, I said what the law actually is. Like I said, we can talk offline, but I think it's important to give you a chance to speak on that. Because let me say, the governor's been a friend and a huge supporter of the coast. And your letter took a lot of people and opened up some wounds that need to be fixed. And I stand by my letter 100%. And there's a back and forth going on about GCRF and about MDA's role on the coast. As I've said before, Ingalls Shipbuilding is hiring 4,000 people, generally speaking, at any one time. MDA has never had a project like that come to the coast. The coast is a unique situation, as it's been explained to me. And it seems to me, and people, my constituencies, including everybody from Hancock County to Jackson County, aren't happy with the performance of MDA down on the coast. So again, I want, please respond. I am happy to have these conversations offline. I'm also happy to discuss about GCRF, but my letter speaks to how I see it and how many, many people where I'm at see it, including the economic development agencies, Hancock, Harrison, Jackson County. And so we need to get somewhere, in my opinion, so that MDA can function, or at least to assist the coast in economic development. Because I'll go back and then I'll be quiet. Again, why should I sign on to these additional budget requests when south of Hattiesburg, we don't see it? And if I'm mistaken, then please let me know. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Got your letter. Let me just address the performance of MDA south of Hattiesburg. And I'll just say kind of a general comment. Almost every area of the state has the same complaint. I was in a budget hearing last week where the Delta says they don't get anything. I've been down to Southwest Mississippi. Southwest Mississippi doesn't get anything. Southeast Mississippi doesn't get anything. Up in the Golden Triangle, they're the only ones that get anything. I've got a map of all of MDA's projects throughout the state that we've landed over $65 billion worth of projects. And they're
Just looking from afar, I see nothing in Jackson or Harrison County.
Well, there's all kinds of dots down here.
Okay.
I'm happy to give you the list and we can talk about the projects, but as you know, Senator, I worked in Hancock County for 4.5 years. During my time there, we landed Relativity Space, major expansions at Lockheed Martin.
We or MDA?
MDA was intimately involved in every single one of those projects. Okay. And Relativity Space was brought to us in large part by Phil Bryant's administration. There's a partnership that occurs between the local economic development authorities and MDA, and to suggest that MDA gets to choose where companies go anywhere in the state is one of the fallacies that I think needs to be addressed. What happens is we condition the battle space through product development, through workforce development programs, through working with local economic development organizations, so that the product exists, so that when companies show an interest in the state, we direct them to those areas of the state that fit the needs of the company. And it would be great if MDA, if I could wave my magic wand and just tap and bring a $10 billion data center to the coast. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. Now, I think what MDA has done very successfully in advocating for is transformational investments throughout the state that allow large-scale industrial development to find a speed to market play in these various regions. And Governor Reeves and I have both worked on programs through the discretionary funding that he has from the federal level, as well as money that you appropriate, to distribute these resources on the coast in areas that are going to provide transformational change. One of those was just recently announced in Hancock County at their new technology park called Ignition Park, a brand new 25-acre development near the airport that just had a massive new transformational project, a consolidated government effort to do remote sensing, imaging, and technology development that wasn't going to be possible without a partnership between the community and the state. We just did a major transformational project with PCC Gulf Chem to do a major chlorine play, $500 million project in Harrison County. There's a $300 million project in Jackson County BWC terminals that we helped incentivize at MDA.
And Chevron helped locate them there. And the Jackson County Economic Development Foundation did that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And look, it happens throughout the state. Joey Deason and Entergy Mississippi were the principal folks that brought AWS to the state. And we came in and did a special session and did our part. I think the challenge that we have is that folks have the mistaken impression that MDA is the one that drives the locational decisions of companies in the state. And that just isn't true. We provide the palette of opportunities across the state for these companies we put our best foot forward, working with the local communities to drive those decisions. And then we provide the best statutorily authorized incentives that these companies can take advantage of and that the local communities can take advantage of to deliver the projects. The coast is the most economic development and asset intensive region in the state.
Correct.
If it's not functioning and winning projects, it's hard for me to understand how 6 project managers at MDA and a handful of grant administrators can do more for the coast than the coast can do for itself. I would just simply argue that if there's a problem down there, it's because we're not thinking big enough about what's happening. And that was the source of my letter to the coast and the recommendation to this body about what you should do. And in Jackson County, for example, you've got Singing River Island, which is an underperforming asset, which had no investment. You had the Port of Pascagoula, which finally, for the first time in many years, has a strategic plan, which caused misalignment in the community, but should be invested in, and which I went down there to help try to figure out how MDA could participate.
And just so the record's clear, that person who was in there has now been fired
Right.
by that. And so you were working with a person at the Port of Pascagoula who was fired and caused all kinds of problems in the community. This is the partnership that I'm talking about.
We didn't hire and fire him, so I don't know why
but
that's
the
MDA's
governor,
problem.
I'm sorry, but the governor has appointees on the Port of Pascagoula. And what I learned was that there was friction between the governor's appointees and the supervisor's appointees. I mean, which caused all kinds of problems down there in Jackson County. So, I think I'm with you about a partnership. That's what needs to happen. But I also think, and if there's underperforming things, that stuff needs to be discussed. But I think if what you've said, that makes total sense. However, that's not the impression that I've been given and my constituents have been given, is that you're dictating to us how economic development should be done, even though you've just sat here and said, it's not our job, we work with the locals, but that's not how it's being portrayed. So either there's messaging or there's something. And when you say that this same thing happens throughout the state, every place of the state has the same complaint, that tells me either something's not working or the messaging isn't working. And we need economic development. And I'm not saying that it's the locals, if you will, have every single answer. What I'm saying is the partnership that you're talking about. And you're bringing up the Port of Pascagoula and all that. And that was a big problem that caused tremendous issues in the community that was unnecessary as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you. I don't think losing political alignment is good for any community. It's
Right.
It's one of the things I preach about throughout the state when I go around and help communities get educated on this. What I can tell you is I go where I'm invited. I was invited to the Port of Pascagoula to review their plan with their Port Authority board and with their executive director. As a former port director myself, I can tell you I thought their plan was competent. Whether it met the needs or alignment of the community was not mine to judge, but at least it gave us a roadmap for how we could help start investing in the Port of Pascagoula. I think we'd all agree that the port, in many ways, is an underperforming asset.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
That's fine.
It was the 16th largest port in the country. Yes, they had a change in leadership because I think people wanted to have more activity and that was being handled. Except lo and behold, stuff happened and the director got fired. And so, no, I don't think it's an underperforming asset. It's the largest port in the state of Mississippi. It's about understanding where we live and what we do. Now, we can have differences of how things should operate, but to be dictated to is not a partnership.
Well, nobody's dictating anything to
Okay.
anything in the state. I believe very firmly in the concepts of subsidiarity. The decisions about the future of these communities should be made as close to the local community as possible. I think if you look at what this body has done to appropriate funds in GCRF or anything else, MDA has taken great care to execute those faithfully and in accordance with the wishes of this body is signed off on by the governor. I have a responsibility to this body to make recommendations under GCRF. I had a 109-page document that I submitted with my recommendations. They included all the original source documents that came in for applications out of the portal with MDA's scoring. They included the results of the Gulf Coast Advisory Council's scoring and recommendations. And what I did was take that to the governor and sit down and ask, what do we want to do? How do we want to recommend this? And his disappointment was that we didn't have enough projects that were directed toward his objectives, which are creating larger scale industrial development that creates jobs for Mississippians at higher than above the average county wage.
So,
And that's why we made the recommendation, think bigger.
okay, so
But you
two
can do whatever
things.
you want,
So
Senator.
two things. One, your predecessors never did that. Okay. Number two, Governor Reeves, when he was lieutenant governor, passed that legislate, or it passed under his watch. He knows what's in that. So now you're changing.
I don't think we're changing it. I think you can do whatever you want with the recommendations that we've made.
But your predecessors didn't do what you did.
Come up with an original idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's an original idea, your predecessor, because that's not what the law says. You are 100% correct that you provide the recommendations, the data. That is what it is. The problem was that your letter got into the policy space that is reserved for the legislature. And the legislature spends the money, and that's the law. Now, it wasn't portrayed as recommendations. And also, I don't think the law actually says recommendations. What it says is to vet the projects and make a recommendation and give us the projects after the advisory committee has made their recommendations. And y'all have done that. It's been there. I think that may be how y'all see it, but you know that I've received, not just me, but I would speak for a lot of on the coast, are not happy with how MDA is handling the GCRF, y'all's part of the GCRF. You would recognize that, right?
I do recognize it.
Okay.
And the reason why I will take personal responsibility since I've been executive director, because you haven't appropriated any GCRF funds since I've been executive director. So I'm not exactly sure what I can do to take credit for the GCRF fund failing, because I'm inherited.
There's no failing. There is
I'll
there's
tell you what,
delay
all
in
right,
bureaucracy.
there's.
Sorry,
gonna be-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator Wiggins, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but I know we've got another agency coming in a few minutes. I've got a few questions too that I want to ask, and we can have a further discussion if we need to on GCRF and the coast and other issues if we need to. Certainly happy to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I am happy to have with Mr. Cork and I to sit down in particular, and we have these discussions. And just to finish up, the governor has been a friend of the coast, knows that. I do think this is some of the things that these are worthy discussions, but they're also get personal to the coast people. And it is something that the executive branch and the legislative branch needs to address. And so I'm happy to do that
Yeah,
offline.
we're going to do it. We're going to have to do it later, but what's good for the coast is good for Mississippi, as it is in any other part of the state. So I think this is important. All these discussions as it relates to economic development projects and the work that MDA does and the GCRF appropriations are all important because they all benefit the state. So I'm not trying to opine on any of the stuff that y'all are discussing. I'm just trying to state that it is a fact. And we also have a lot of other things we got to deal with today. So I'm not meaning to cut you off, but I hope you understand just from a timeliness standpoint, we need to move along. Quickly, Brian, you made these comments on the model for continuing to support. Yeah, we've moved away from we're just throwing money in based on pins and being allowed to use those throughout the agency. So I don't think, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to get back to that place. I'm hoping that we get back. We are at a place where we're going to have the funding that's related to specific employees and head counts. I do want to question, and maybe I just haven't followed up on this. I obviously haven't followed up on this, but I know in the special session last year, we put at the governor's request, the additional employees into MDA, and now you're saying that there is not funding for that amount, the amount that you're requesting today. Is that correct?
The amount that we're requesting today includes additional funding for roughly 19 pins. When we go back and put the numbers on the paper with the current field pins that we have, the cost of those pins, we end up
Exceed.
at about 190 pins that we have funding for. And then there's 19 pins that we do not have funding for.
We had 209
Yes, sir.
last year, and that's the request for this year. It looks like 201 was your number when the LBR, when the snapshot was done.
Yes, sir.
Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
So you're about 8 shy of where you need to be on that, and you may have lost some since then. Is that right?
Well, we're currently right around 165, 170 field pins, and we're working to close that gap between the 170 and the 190. But we do have, I mean, as Bill refers to it as churn. We have people leave and we have to backfill those, which takes up time that we don't have to move towards filling the pins that, or the plus ups that we would have for the fiscal year. So we're working towards that. It's a not ongoing effort. But
Let me just double click on that, Mr. Chairman. Over the last couple of years, we've really done a good job of trying to figure out what our frictional unemployment rate is in the agency. There's always a constant turnover. That's about 20 pins. So there's about 20 pins due to retirements, people leaving to go take other jobs. We constantly have about 20 pins, about 10% of the agency right now and we're really actually doing a pretty good job at retention.
Mhm.
So whenever we take a snapshot, it just depends on what that frictional rate is. So, that's the penalty we've been trying to get away from having to pay every year is that frictional unemployment is always going to be there. We need the funding and the pins in order to be able to fill those roles when they come.
Yeah,
open.
and that's not atypical of just about every agency I hear from. So you're not alone.
The other thing is we're not a homogeneous organization. It's not like we have, 500 grant processors that process the same grant. I mean, we're one deep on many of these grants. We have over 40 programs that you all have us administer, including federal programs. And that number seems to have gone up 14% in the last 5 years. So if we only have one person in that role and they transition out and we lose that pin, it's very, very difficult to do that program. So that's the other challenge here.
Yeah.
Just we're such a diverse organization and have our hands in so many pots that the specialties required to run each of those programs is very diverse.
Yeah, I understand. And so the number you're seeking on the additional pins is about 1.7 million, right?
Yes, sir.
And again, quickly, because I know we've got a time issue here on the energy investment fund. I don't want you to divulge any secrets here today that our competing states and other places would want to utilize. And if we need to talk about it outside of the subcommittee hearing, we can do that. Is this to incentivize current private energy companies to invest in Mississippi?
You're referring to the $100 million program?
Yep, right, $100 million.
This is really
And again, feel free to
No,
say, look,
this
we can
is
talk
not
about
a secret.
this.
Yeah, this is not a secret, Mr. Chairman. This is really a response to what we see in the neighborhood. There's a $1 billion bond fund for this type of work that was done last year in Alabama to do exactly what we're trying to do. And essentially what that does is it takes some of the utility companies have a very difficult time in prospectively purchasing distribution, switchgear, transformers, substation equipment, outside of, especially if they're a regulated utility, outside of their rate-based filings. And so some of these things can be fairly expensive costs. What we're trying to do is be able to have a fund put together where we can make the deposits on those assets so that we can get them ordered in time to shorten the life cycle of sales for our major projects coming in. So there's nothing that's actually tied to a specific project right now. This is a venture fund essentially to help us get some long lead time assets under either deposit or purchase so that when we make a case to a company come in here, we can tell them we've already got that stuff on order.
And you would anticipate those funds would be repaid
By the
company.
utility
Okay.
or by the company, or it could be used as an inducement to the project, depending on, what the project needs are.
All right. I think the other things I could probably just talk about when we have a chance to get together. I do want to get into the America 250, I want to talk about your career ladder a little bit more, but just in the interest of time, we can meet again soon. Also, film incentive program. Just remind me some of these things I want to talk to you about when we have a few more minutes. Get an update on all these
It's a
projects.
good list. We're
Yeah.
we're over the target. And I know there's
I-
a bunch of film incentive
I
program
have a lot
bills
of
pending
little
too.
things that we can go over, but I know, again, time is going to get us today. Thanks. Look, thanks to MDA and the governor's office and a lot of other locals too. For any locals that may be listening that are really doing some yeoman's work, all of y'all together to bring in some of these projects. So it's good news for Mississippi. We keep building and growing and offering opportunities for our citizens, and that's a great thing. So thank y'all for being here. We'll get together soon.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be real quick. I want to
Not sure I want to recognize.
I know-
I will briefly.
Thank you.
Senator Wiggins.
I agree too. I think the MDA, the recent landings of the data centers and everything has been really good for the state. I commend what's been going on through that. I voted for the packages that came through, and I think that's very good. And I think the country's seeing that. There's just certain issues that we need to get. So thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies in the back. And then next up, I know we got DHS. Bob, if you want to bring your team up here, we'd be grateful. Okay. No.
Yeah, I sent them to, Bob and Lee last week. So. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Anderson, good to see you, and we will hear from you and then offer the committee members an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I have just to my left, Deborah Dixon. She's our Deputy Executive Director for Finance and Administration. And then Brett Robinson is our CFO back here. And I think some of you know Mark Jones. He's our Chief Communications Officer. So I'll start where I usually start. You have these slides in front of you. Just to remind you, as all of you know, MDHS is really predominantly funded through federal funds. About 91% of our funding is money that we draw down from the federal government. Only about 8, almost 9% of our budget is funded by a state general fund. But this year, due to quite a few things that have happened in DC and elsewhere, we are asking for a significant increase in our funding. Last year, the current fiscal year, we were funded at 92.9 million in general fund appropriations. We're asking for a $54.9 million increase for a total state fiscal year 27 general fund appropriation of 147.9 million. A good bit of that, as I'll explain here shortly, has to do with staffing. And if you look by division here, the two predominant largest increases are for economic programs. That's our SNAP and TANF and workforce development programs, and for youth services. If you've had a chance to look at the governor's executive budget request, you know we've been asked to prepare Oakley to take as many as 100 children, and that will require some significant additional staffing and funding. And I have some other bad news to share. I learned yesterday we have a 100,000 gallon water tower on campus at Oakley, which in the cold, the supply line froze over and emptied the whole tower. We don't have any water out at Oakley, so we're going to have some additional expenses there, hopefully short term, because we're having to bring porta potties on campus to have bathroom facilities for, we only have about 40 youth there right now, thank goodness. But the governor's EBR has asked us to prepare to take up to 100 at Oakley, and he also is recommending there be an additional youth services or certainly juvenile justice facility in North Mississippi and South Mississippi that would accommodate up to 100 children there. The majority of those, the cost increase relate to salaries, as you can also see there. And I wanted to, if I can get it to advance. Oh, it might advance. Get the next slide to advance. Can you advance it?
We've got our sheets too.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right. Just where we are right now, we did lose a little over 100 pins in this past appropriation, and we're asking for those to be restored. Right now, we're at 1,655 positions. We're asking to move up to 1,589 full-time positions. Originally, in our budget request, we'd asked for 431 additional time-limited positions, but you see I've added 58 childcare licensure pins. Back before the first of the year, Dr. Edney and I met, and he asked me to consider whether MDHS would be willing to take on the childcare licensure program that has been at the Department of Health for a number of years. We had a discussion about that, and it's really like a maternal health program that we had that was not our core function. Child care is not Department of Health's core function. And so we agreed to take on that child care licensure program. Senator Boyd has introduced a bill that will accomplish that. I think it's already, I know it's passed out of the Public Health and Welfare Committee, and it's headed to the floor. So we're asking for an additional 58. Those are 100% federally funded positions. We fund it through with Child Care Development Fund monies. So we will be asking for a total number of pins of 2,078. And just to show you what our historical numbers have looked like in our staffing, we dropped down to a low point in actually this current fiscal year. We're fairly low overall, and are looking to add 479 new positions. And just to spell out more clearly what I said earlier, the majority of this increase relates to salaries. There's a $54.9 million overall request. 42.1 million of that relates directly to salaries. And we're looking to do several things there. One, we've had a career ladder plan approved for our economic assistance staff and for our social service specialists who work in youth services and our adult protective service. MSPB approved the career ladders about 2 years ago, but they've not been fully funded. We're asking that those be fully funded. We would also need to continue using the ladders for youth service workers, food service workers, and teachers at Oakley to add the additional staff there. And we're asking you for the first time to give us authority to pay overtime to Oakley employees. They do earn overtime, but they earn it in the form of compensatory time. And when they get to that statutory maximum of 240, we have to pay out that accrued compensatory overtime. What we would like to do is to align with the Department of Corrections. They pay overtime on a pay period by pay period basis. People accrue it in an 80-hour work week. They're paid in that 80-hour work week for overtime. It helps their retention. I'm absolutely certain it would help our retention and our recruitment if we could pay our youth services workers, who for all practical purposes are correctional staff, if we could pay them contemporaneously with the time that they work the overtime. And then there's additional travel expense for various divisions across the agency, particularly some major changes in the aging program due to a new final federal final rule, and some training and in-person audits that we have to do related to our Adult Protective Service and other Older Americans Act programs. And the remainder of that salary increase is for retention, title changes, salary increases, moving folks closer toward market aligned salaries so that we can keep them on board. Again, just to unbundle some of what this increase relates to, 15 million of that is directly related to HR 1, or if you prefer, the One Big Beautiful Bill, effective October 1st of this year. The state share of administrative costs for the SNAP program increases from 50%. That program's always been a 50-50 share. The state pays 50%, the feds pay 50% of the cost of administering the program. October 1st of this year, the state's share goes up to 75%. And based on our current, most recent fiscal year, we expended about $60 million on administering an $800 million program. So an extra 25% of that equates to $15 million, 1/4 of that, basically $15 million. Now, that's not all new money, or it's not separate from what's in these salary increases. In fact, 12 million of the 15 million additional cost is included in what I just talked about in regard to salary increases. We are also asking for about $500,000 because we have a standing waiting list for the dementia care program. That has proved to be a very beneficial program for families dealing with a loved one who is suffering with dementia. But we can't accommodate all the people who want to be in that program, and we're asking for a modest increase of actually $400,000 to increase the enrollment there. We brought some legislators out back in the summer to look at Oakley and look at the old cottages that have been on the property there for many years. They have been inactive. All but one of those cottages has been unused for probably close to 15 or 20 years. They are full of mold. The flooring, I'm told, has asbestos. The paint has lead in it. We talked with the Department of Archives and History. Not surprisingly, there's no historic value to those old cottages, and we got just a general estimate through Bureau of Buildings of the cost to demolish all of those cottages, and included in our budget request is 4.6 million to demolish about 15 cottages. There's only one that's in active use. We use it as a training center so that we can pull our staff out of the dormitory and housing units and put them in one of the cottages for training. To demolish all of the cottages, the cost would be about 4.6 million. Certainly, if the legislature is inclined to do that on an incremental basis, we're hopeful to do it all at once, but we could do it $1 million, $2 million at a time and demolish those cottages over the next 2 or 3 years. We've asked in the last couple of years for additional funding for home delivered meals. All of us know that inflation has pushed the cost of meals up. And we've been funded flat at 1 million for those home delivered meals. We're asking to raise that up to $3 million in order to allow us to continue to provide over 1.1 million home delivered meals to older Mississippians all across the state. One additional thing we're required to do in order to implement the changes under the Older Americans Act that the federal final rule required was to implement a data tracking system. And we are asking in our budget request for $1.5 million to implement a data tracking system under the Older Americans Act. I wanted to talk to you also briefly. It really runs on a separate track because HR 1 caught us after we had prepared our budget fully. As you know, October 1st of 2027, the cost, the actual programmatic cost of the SNAP program will begin to have for the first time a state cost share element. And the way it's structured is based on the state's payment error rate. If the payment error rate is 6 to 8%, the state will have to assume 5% of the programmatic cost. And based on our most recent history, an $800 million program, 5% would mean an additional 40 million for the state. If the payment error rate is 8 to 10%, the state will be required to assume 10% of the programmatic cost. That would be an additional $80 million to the state. And then if the state's payment error rate is over 10%, as of October 1st, 2027, the state would have to pick up 15% of the programmatic costs. And based on our historical numbers, that worst case scenario would mean $120 million in additional costs. And I'm sure your first question is, what are we doing about our payment error rate? And we are doing a number of things. We are working with 2 companies in particular, Westat and Code for America, to basically get a handle on all of the factors that influence our payment error rate and try to get those under control. We know that 2 of the primary ones are employment verification and income verification. And we had access for a short time to Equifax and the work number, but it was under a FNS funded free trial period that has expired. I've not been bashful about asking other companies who do income verification for free trials. So we have 3 going right now with a company called Truve, a company called Promise, and then a separate company called Steady IQ. And what we have discussed, I think Corbin you were in that meeting. We discussed with Elbow what we think would be the best approach to get our payment error under control is to follow the model. The state of Georgia is using 3 vendors. They use 2 like Truve or Steady IQ, and then Equifax, which is the most expensive among all of those, is kind of the fail-safe, the 3rd option for them. So if they have a confidence level of 90 to 95% with the information they get from the first or the second vendor, they don't use Equifax at all. And then they save Equifax if they feel like the numbers they're getting on a particular applicant are not at a high level of confidence, then they run a 3rd check through Equifax. And that's the model that we are proposing. Representative Clay DeWeese, who chairs our subcommittee, our appropriation subcommittee in the House, is, I believe, putting together a separate appropriation bill. We are trying to get an exact quote from these companies after we run these pilots. The estimate we've been given is $5 to $10 million to get all of the cost covered for income and employment verification. We will get a solid number there as soon as we can. I'm waiting to hear from my Deputy Executive Director for Economic Programs to get that final figure together. But we are examining all of the reasons for our payment error rate. Right now, our payment error rate is 10.49% in the most recent month. So if HR 1 were effective today, we would be in the 15% cost share band. We don't want to be in that band. Can we get down to 6% or below? I'm not certain. We're doing everything we can to do root cause analysis about every kind of factor that impacts our payment error rate. And I hope we can get it at least down to the 6 to 8%, and bring us down to the 5% level. But it is certainly possible that when the cost share goes into effect, that Mississippi will be absorbing, if we continue in the SNAP program, we'll have to be absorbing some of the costs. The other thing that's kind of disconcerting about that is the payment error rate number that will impact us on October 1st of next year is what our payment error rate is as of September 30th of this year. So that's why we're working with all of these vendors, trying to get a handle on it, hopefully by April or May at the latest, in order to, get it to the lowest point we can, because the number that determines our cost share is what our payment error rate is on October 1 of 2026. And we want it to be at the lowest level possible. And then lastly, just to kind of sum it all up, as I said, we're asking for a general fund increase of 54.9. I would say, I mentioned the Success Project. That's our system modernization project. You and I talked briefly about this, Mr. Chairman, or at least I left you a message and you left me a message about it. That project we began in the spring of last year. It had a 2.5-year cycle built into the RFP and into the project itself. At the time we set the timeline, we had no idea something like HR 1 was coming along. But the project is on schedule. We expect to go into user acceptance testing in February of next year, and then to go live with our new system in May of 2027. That is the timeline we've had since we wrote the RFP. I wish I could speed it up. We're staying a few weeks ahead of time, which I'm pleased that we're ahead of time, but this is a huge project. We're building a completely new integrated eligibility platform for our SNAP, TANF, child care program, and then a separate platform for child support. And there are a lot of moving parts to that, but it is on schedule. We've validated all the requirements. They're building the system now, and it's on schedule. As I said earlier, we're requesting 413 additional headcount to both improve performance and also to meet the governor's request that we move Oakley to a place where it can accommodate 100 youth out there. And we've also requested, I believe it's about $500,000 in our request for the requirement that we move to public cloud migration. The legislature, I believe, mandated that every agency move to a public cloud setting, and for us to do that while we're building this new system, we've asked for an additional $500,000. Those are the basics, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Well, I have several, but I'll defer now to my colleagues here. Senator McClendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. On the dementia care program, how many people do we have in that program right now?
Senator, I think right now we have about 50 in that. That's what it was funded for, was to accommodate 50. And the increase would take us up to, I believe, 70.
Do we know how many people have dementia in the state?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's hundreds of, possibly thousands. I mean, this is a small scale program, but we were asked to put one together and we did, but I mean, it could be much larger. That's a question I think the Mind Center over at UMC could answer much more accurately than I, but I'm fairly comfortable in saying there are thousands of Mississippians who suffer from dementia.
Are the people that's in this program, are they housed in nursing homes? Or are they at home?
The ones in this program are all at home. What the program does is it provides 27 hours of respite care to caregivers who are caring for a loved one in their home. And so it allows, you know, if a husband and wife are caring for, say, a parent, then our dementia care program provides them 27 hours of paid caregiver service so they can take a weekend off, have a break from the full-time responsibility of caring for that person with dementia.
Is that the reason for the increase there on the aging and adult services, is because you're going up on the number of people you're carrying? Or
That's most of the reason. Yes, sir.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator McClendon. Senator Wiggins, questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question centers around Oakley, and really just the cost. I've heard different things. I don't know all the numbers, but from between what it costs to operate and then your requests, and let me say this up front. I'm not saying we don't need a place like Oakley for what we would consider the youth that have been found to need to be in a place like that. But you said 100 kids, and as I understand the budget, there's a lot of money going into Oakley for 100 kids if you look at it that way. And Oakley, my understanding, is an old facility. So when I hear y'all requesting, for these improvements and all, I just wonder how much, is there some alternative? Is that the only alternative? Because it's a lot of money for 100 youth. And also just, there's a lot of movement going on addressing the Youth Court Act and courts and all that. So I just want to get your thoughts on that, because it does seem like a lot of money for 100 kids.
Yes, sir. It's a lot of money for the 40 that are there right now.
Okay, for the 40, yeah.
I mean, we spend about $15 million a year on operating Oakley at its current level. And, to double, it actually go up 1.5 times from where we are right now, would require significant additional staffing. And you're right, it's an old facility. When I came into this position 6 years ago, I'm gonna be very honest, Oakley had been neglected. It was easy to tell it had been neglected for a decade or longer. A lot of what most of us would consider routine maintenance was just not being done. That's why we're having to replace the air conditioning system. That's why we're having to replace all of the locks throughout the whole system. That's why we're, I hope we don't have to replace this water tower. I hope we can just fix the supply line is all the issue we have there. But we have, we have sinkholes out there we're having to fix. We have a wastewater treatment plant out there that we're having to repair. And we have been able to obtain some ARPA money through the Bureau of Buildings to make a lot of the physical plant improvements. But to increase the staffing to the level to accommodate 100, we have about 320 people there, I think, right now. We would have to go up to about 500 at least in order to be able to keep our required staffing ratios in place. Are there other options?
Yeah, I guess that is there.
Yeah.
Have y'all looked at other options in that? I'll put it more affordable options. Let me put it that way.
Well, affordable, I'm not sure whether building something new would be more affordable. You know,
Right.
privatization is certainly an option. We had a company come out and make a tour. You probably are familiar with Wayne's Halfway House out of Tennessee. They run 2 or 3 juvenile justice facilities in Tennessee, and I think South Carolina. They run them privately. You know, if they could find a location, I don't know if we have an abandoned correctional facility or there was a job center facility, I think vacated last year, you know, that could be operated privately. That's a possibility. Oakley has always been, and under the law still is, essentially the big house, if you will, for juvenile
Right.
justice. Only reason you wind up at Oakley is if you committed what would be a felony if you
Right.
were charged as an adult. Well, there are a lot of other needs, as you well know, Senator, for misdemeanor level and other offenses in the juvenile justice system. And there are only 15 juvenile detention centers across the state. So the governor's EBR recommends a facility that would house 100 in North Mississippi and 100 in South Mississippi. I think those facilities, if they're privately run, for example, could provide a lot of relief to those counties that don't have a detention facility. But that's another option to answer your question.
Yeah. You're right. It's for the worst of, as they say, the worst of the worst that, in my experiences, they go through it. It's not like these are repeat offenders in that sense.
Well, some are.
Yeah.
But we've had some great successes. You know, I want to say this, you know, one of our most recent graduates, if you will, he finished his GED while he was at Oakley, and he entered the Army as soon as he was released from Oakley. So we're turning some lives around.
That's great.
And there's a commitment by Dr. Daniels, the director, to make sure Oakley is a place where young people can have a second chance.
Well, and that brings up my point is from what you've described, and let me say, I appreciate y'all bringing this because from what you've described, it was neglected, as you said, and I don't care what crime that's been adjudicated, kids don't need to be in a place that the state is neglecting in that sense, which I think that's what you're bringing to our attention. So it just gets back to the money side of this. And you said we can get that, but basically I'm hearing like $30 million to run Oakley for what we have right now is 40 kids. I mean, that's a fair statement.
Well,
Would that be a fair statement?
the current year, it's about 15 million. Is
Okay.
what's in our budget for 2026, what we'll spend this year.
Okay.
We spend about 17.5 million. Is that about right for all of youth services? Including, you know, in every county, we have youth services counselors who work with the youth court judges. That's about $3.5 million of our youth services budget. The rest of our budget for youth services is for the staff and the physical plant, the medical services, everything that it takes to keep Oakley operating.
That was my question. But how much, the line item for Oakley, do you know that? And if so, how much is that?
I don't have it right at hand, but I'm going to say it's around 15 million.
Okay.
Senator.
And then adding in these requests to get it up to, my term is par, that would be how much?
That would be about an additional, trying to find the exact number. I'm going to say about $18 million.
Okay. So that essentially capital expense, but okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Mr. Anderson, a few questions. One is, last year we gave the 15 million for the child care. I don't see that on your request list this year. Y'all,
Well, It's baked into our request. We're asking you to level fund us at that 15 million you gave us last year.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you were here last week, at, Senator Bryan's invitation. I came and talked about childcare last week. And what I told the Public Health and Welfare Committee is, we'll use every dollar of that 15 million again this year. We could use 30 million. We could use 60 million in order to get to the level of funding that we were at the height of our ARPA funding, which is where the, that's where the rub is. We saw $45 million in ARPA funding go away a year and a half ago, and
I'm
that's
aware.
where we are.
What is are that you've seen any shifts or changes in the need for child? I mean, I hear nationally that there is a big need for childcare.
Yes.
And I'm certain that's the same here in Mississippi. Are we seeing any shifts that may be going down a little bit, or that's continuing to go up, or have y'all studied or looked at that?
Yes, sir. We're looking at it. It continues to go up. I mean, we have a waiting list right now of 18,000 on our child care payment program. One of the things I mentioned last week is that we're looking at, we do have some TANF unallocated funds that we are going to look at. Once I'm satisfied that we can do it properly and accountably under federal law and regulation, we already convert 30% of our TANF state grant directly to child care development funds. That's all the law allows for a direct conversion. But we can also do essentially child care assistance, direct assistance to families with TANF funding. We're looking to do that. Will that absorb that 18,000? No, we don't have enough TANF money in the grant to absorb the full.
Are you making sure that the people that are the child care is for people that are going to work have gainful employment?
Yes, sir. That's a requirement of the program. Do not get a certificate unless you're working 25 hours a week.
Right. So I knew that, and I just want to make sure y'all are looking at that. That doesn't have anything to do with error rates for SNAP benefits or
Not
anything
at
like
all.
that. There's no measurement or national standard on error rates as far as child care. I want to make sure that those dollars go into folks that have gainful employment.
Yes, sir.
That are needing the child care. Otherwise, they can't keep their job.
Yes,
Correct.
sir. That is a requirement that they report their employment, and we verify that in order to award them a certificate.
Okay, I'm gonna quickly go through some things. I think Senator Wiggins has hit on the Oakley and juvenile justice. And did you say 100, you could use 100 in the north and 100 in the south? You could, if you had the facilities.
I think that the counties throughout the state, yes, could use that capacity.
So we're talking about 300 total. If you still had Oakley
Yes.
at 100 and you had one in the south, one in the
Yes.
north, we're talking about
Yeah.
300
Whether-
juveniles that need that attention.
I can't tell you that all three of those would be fully, would be full if they were open. But I do know that we receive regular requests from
Yeah.
counties all over the state to take children who don't qualify for Oakley because their county doesn't have a facility. I know
Well,
that. And I think that's part of the governor's recommendation.
Keep engaging with Senator Wiggins and obviously Senator Blackwell and myself on that issue, because
Yes, sir.
that, I know that's important. And Senator McClendon hit on the dementia care program, which is good. I'm glad he covered that. The child care licensures, did you say that is something you want, if Department of Health hands it off?
Yes, sir. Dr. Edney asked us if we would take it. I agreed to take it. Our current director of our Division of Early Childhood Care and Development, Dr. Chad Allgood, he came out of the child care licensure. We have the expertise to do that.
Okay.
One of his managers in the program also came out of the licensure program, and we're paying for 2/3 of that already.
Yeah, I just wondered if y'all had the wherewithal to take care. I know sanitation and say those kind of, kitchen sanitation or changing rooms. Is that within your bailiwick to be able to handle things like that, or is that something that you feel like health would be better? I don't. As long as it's done properly,
Yes, sir.
I don't think that we would
Right.
care. We just want to make sure it's done
Right.
properly. And if
Well,
you've got the wherewithal and ability to do it,
We do know the
Does-
child care licensure piece is a little separate from the health and welfare piece of that. We're
Yeah.
the licensure for childcare is looking at the number of staff, the number of rooms available. It does check to make sure it's a, safe and sanitary facility. But if there's sanitation violations, then a different division of health will come in, but it puts the license at risk. I mean, we do have the leverage, and we anticipate bringing all of that childcare licensure staff directly over from
Okay.
health.
I'm going back to many years ago, and this came up. I've been here, I guess, too long now, but came up a long time ago about whether or not DHS or another entity other than Department of Health should be handling it. Which it seemed to me at that time, this might be better suited for DHS. And I think the concern was that there are things that are kind of health standards within childcare. And again, I don't remember all of them, kitchens, bathroom kind of things that would certainly be important, or sanitary changing areas. And if your folks are qualified to handle it, then I don't know, again, that it's going to matter as much, but I want to make sure that there's not the ball's not dropped in any important areas on childcare.
Yes, sir.
Safety and
Well,
sanitation.
and I would remind you, we're also required in our current childcare program to spend 7% of our money on quality for childcare. And that quality relates to the staffing as well as the physical plant and making sure those facilities are in the, good operating conditions. So we're already doing kind of a piece of that. We're just not actually awarding the license.
Okay.
And that would.
Yep, I'm moving fast on this. The computer, it just takes a long time to get all this stood up, correct? The
Yes, sir.
software and hardware and everything you need,
Yes,
it's
sir.
just taking a while. But do you feel like that it will be up to date? If this is fully implemented in spring of 27, is it going to be, I hope we're not developing something that's going to be getting old quickly after 27. You feel like this is a product that will stand the test of time for many years?
Yes, sir. And Senator, let me mention, we are the fifth state. We're getting the fifth iteration of this platform that our vendor built. They built it in Oregon. They built it in Louisiana and Florida. The most recent update was Tennessee. Since the state and federal money is paying for that, every update, we get the benefit of it. So it will be up to date and it'll stay up to date. And they have, after they build it, they have a maintenance and operation obligation for a couple of years to make sure it is fully operational. And then every time an update is made in any state where they built it, every state that uses this vendor gets the benefit of those updates.
Okay. On your career ladder that you mentioned, roughly $42 million, it appears, is how much of that's federal funded employees and how much is going to be state funded?
I wish my deputy for HR was here. She's out of pocket
Just
today.
if you
but-
can get that to us.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it, please, when you get a moment. And then on your slide with the page 2 on the request by divisions, can you break down, you don't have to do it today, but if you can do it quickly, fine. What falls under these 5 categories: aging, DECCD, econ, youth, and support services? You might can tell us real quickly what falls under each of those
Yes, sir.
divisions.
Aging is about 3 programs. It's the Adult Protective Service. It's all of our Older Americans Act programs, home delivered meals, medical assistance, the health insurance program, and the long-term care ombudsman program. All those fall under aging. DECCD, that's the child care program. That's all that's in there is the child care payment program. Economic programs is TANF, SNAP, and workforce development. Those are the 3 pieces of economic assistance. And youth services is Oakley, and then the youth services counselors. We have 2 divisions in youth services. We have the institutional division, which is the 400 or so people who are at Oakley, and then we have the field staff in all of the youth courts. Every county has a youth court counselor. And so that's what's youth services. And then support services is everything else. That's our finance division. That's our maintenance, our HR, administrative services, everything that basically pays the bills and overhead keeps the buildings operating.
What about your meals program? Is that under aging?
That's in aging. That's part of
Okay.
the Older Americans Act.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. And final question I've got, and I may have more later, but we can get together. is related to HR 1. I mean, I knew about the error rate issue, and certainly please keep us posted on that. That's important. We get that error rate down as quickly and as good as we can, low as we can get it, because for those that don't know, that's going to end up costing the state a lot of money if we don't get our error rate down. But the second, I guess the question I have for you is, other than that, how is this going to affect us financially at the state level? How is that bill or the BBB or HR 1, how is that going to affect us at the state level?
The primary impact is going to be in the SNAP program, as far as I can see. There is the possibility, and I think they backed away from it. We thought it was going to impact our social service block grant funding, but it's not. They decided not to implement PAYGO, and so it does not impact our social service block grant, which would impact our youth services as well as our adult protective service. But I think the primary impact for HR 1 for us, it's going to be the 25% additional administrative cost to SNAP, and then wherever we wind up with the cost share, if any, in the programmatic costs for SNAP.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more, but that's going to be an FY 28 issue based on the September 30, 26 results that we have on the error rate, correct? So we'll be looking at that next year's budget, but I just a warning to all listening and all of our colleagues here in the legislature, that is an important, very, very, very important issue, because that could go from from 120 million down to zero, or would it be at least, our share would go up
anything
at least
6% or less
30
doesn't cost us
what's our minimum on the SNAP portion that we would have to pick up?
Well,
based on the error
if we're
rate.
below 6, if we're at 6% or below, we don't have to pick up any. It remains 100%.
Okay.
Let me mention one other thing we're exploring too. FNS has been trying to help states all across the country. They have shared with us a new sampling model that I'm told will simplify what we do, a process called SNAP quality control, where we basically pull a sample of 200 cases every month and check our homework, so to speak. FNS has told us we're using the most complicated algorithm to pull our sample, and they have a much simpler approach that they think will help our error rate. We're trying to get our management information systems team to the place where they can implement that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was at a national program about a month ago, and a little over a month ago, and I think our error rate was 10.6 or 7% is what I saw in Mississippi, which was not good, obviously, from a error rate, but at the same time, there were some states were doing really well. Some, I think, I hate to pick on Alaska, I think they were 24% error rates, way up there. But anyway, look, everybody that's paying attention to this knows, but those that aren't need to start paying attention to this issue, because it's big for the state. So thank you. We've got to go upstairs, but I appreciate your time, and we'll talk more. Motion.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Bob, thank you.